Thank you so much for joining us today on Take 10. We come to you every week with a look at a variety of mental health and related issues as they impact caregiving, caregivers, and carees. I'm Ron Aaron, along with our co-host, Dr. Jamie Huysman. Dr. Huysman is Chief Compassion Officer at WellMed Medical Management. He's known nationally for his work in caregiving and addictions. And Carol Zernial, she holds a master's degree in social gerontology, some 30 years experience in the field. Carol's the co-chair of the Raise Family Caregiving Advisory Council and executive director of the WellMed Charitable Foundation. And Dr. Jamie, you were mentioning that in one of the support groups that you hold, there was a lot of interest and concern about the anger and rage that often follows a diagnosis of dementia, where the dementia person suddenly goes bonkers. What's that all about?
Yes, it was last night, and there were several people that listens to our podcast, which is always a good thing. But it brought to them the reason to ask the question that one caregiver who was extraordinarily dysregulated, I'll call, upset. She has her father who is probably going towards the fourth stage of dementia or Alzheimer's, and his episodic rages and outbursts are narcissistic rage, which is literally this sort of, no empathy, no accountability, no ability to understand what the other person is feeling in any way, transactional in nature. That's what narcissistic rage and anger is. So when we become sick or mental health sick, or our worlds get smaller, Alzheimer's or neurologically sick, our worlds do get smaller. And we don't have any sort of sense of self-awareness, of course, of what's happening in insight about us or others. And then you're talking about the decline neurologically in the brain, which is, organicity, which is a medical process. And I said to her exactly what I say to all of the people that come for toxic abusive relationships, is that you can't control A, the Alzheimer's, B, the other person. It is the Category 5 hurricane coming your way. You can't change the 5 to a 4 or a 3. It's coming your way. What do you do as a response to that? How are you coping with it? And what are you doing in terms of making sure your boundaries, you're not taking it personal, and you're getting emotional support?
Now, is it a given that someone with dementia will enter that phase? I know my dad, who had dementia, he and my mom married 60 plus years, sweetest, loving, most amazing relationship. Suddenly, he started yelling at her out of nowhere, totally unexpected, totally out of character. Ultimately, it passed.
No, I will say that's a good question, but I will say with dementia, and I'm sure Carol is brilliant on this one and has services through the foundation will also substantiate it. But with dementia, yes, I do believe the client will become more irritable, more demanding, and sometimes even manipulative as the cognitive functions decline. And I do believe also the frustration of having a terminal acute illness, losing your memory, and those moments that are deeply, deeply affecting that person is something a caregiver may want to sit back, get some mental health, and be compassionate about, because it's not their fault. They didn't do anything. This is the issue. They can't take it personal. This is the issue of the neurological decline. But I will say, again, when the self-engrossing mental health or neurological disorders taken in account, our worlds become smaller. We become more angry, more agitated, and also complex trauma or childhood issues start taking center stage. And so our own perceptions as the child that was accepted, the child that was not, the person they love, all those things pop up in caregiving.
Yeah, Jamie, my own experience with persons with Alzheimer's, some of the family members, is that there are kind of two phases where the anger tends to pop up. One is when they're in the early phases, they've gotten the diagnosis, they understand what's going on, they feel the frustration of losing things, and then that can go away as the disease progresses. They're not aware. But then, as it progresses even more, then you get those really out of control, not everybody, but that more of the anger and the yelling that just seems to come out of nowhere, whereas you can kind of see why someone's frustrated in the early stages. The latter stages, it's just all of a sudden they're screaming obscenities and being sort of, can be violent.
If you're not allowing yourself to be on 2 feet and to deal with this and understand this involves tremendous emotional complexity, Carol, which is obviously the clinical issues we've never resolved unless we get good therapy over time with that particular person, while they become irritable, while they become paranoid, and while they become, and they leave caregivers, let's say, dumbfounded with the behavior. Now mix that with the person as they saw their mom and dad and the issues, it becomes I'll say it nicely, a poop storm, because if you don't understand clinically what you're dealing with, your whole life is called in question. But that's why we want to teach caregivers or anybody in these narcissistic, toxic sort of relationships on this one, to start learning how to validate, believe this or not, somehow the emotions of that person, to be able to de-escalate them by acknowledging in some way I'm sure you know this, you've seen this, their frustrations or fears, and to be able to stay more calm, which requires us to get more therapy to realize it's not our fault. At the same time, creating boundaries, and these boundaries are to maintain a control over our own mental health, prioritizing our mental health, which doesn't diminish the compassion, but allows us to get out of the fire which is raging around us.
All right, hold that thought. We'll come right back to you. I want to let folks know who may have just joined us. You're listening to Take 10. We look at mental health or related issues as they impact caregiving and the care recipient. I'm Ron Aaron, along with our co-hosts, Dr. Jamie Huysman and Carol Zernial. And Jamie, walk through what are the things that, as the caregiver, you could say in a situation where someone is suddenly going out of control. What can you say to them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ron. I had to do this 35 years ago during deinstitutionalization with psychiatric patients where there was no outpatient programs. I go under bridges and they weren't on their medication. And how do you actually get somebody to de-escalate? Well, number one is obviously you have to be calm, cool, and collected. If you're dysregulated, if you're absolutely all over the place and you're scared and paranoid, believe me, that fear is palpable. And that person going through that process will feel less safe in your presence. And when they feel less safe, they'll become twice as difficult to deal with. So I do think that we really have to, take care of ourselves. Number one, again, acknowledging the fact. And I think this is something that Caregiver SOS does, hopefully. All of us should do nationally and worldwide, is give informed consent to caregivers to expect this, that this is going to happen, and show them ways to de-escalate potential conflicts by taking care of themselves, for sure, maintaining their own calm and steady communications, and actually understanding and not jumping in, we call it the tar pit, the toxic abuse relation pit, the reactive pit, and be proactive, like to do breath work, to do that, or pick up a phone and call a healthy person in your life, or to go out and do yoga or take a walk. How do we self-regulate? So these are things that we should actually explain to caregivers prior to the overall decompensation neurologically.
So, Jamie, sometimes what we're looking for may be a very simple checklist of questions when somebody's acting out, and you know it as well, probably better than me. It's, are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they, what are the other two?
Are they hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Any of those are triggers. And I would add to that, have you moved something? Have you moved their stuff? Have you moved the furniture? Did something change?
I love what you're saying, because they're not just triggers for the narcissistic rage of the person with dementia. Those things you're saying are actually amazing sort of things to be aware of in our body, because trauma is stored in the body, about anything in life that triggers us, because it won't just be our moms or dads or brothers or sisters with dementia. It's going to be anything around us that if we're not taking care of our hunger or angry, if we're not taking our oxygen first, or we're not mind, body, and spirit, seeing a good therapist, coming to your groups at Caregiver SOS and not isolating, these triggers are going to happen no matter what. They're just twice as much on steroids when it's a loved one.
Good place to stop. We'll pick this up again on another Take 10. So much more to cover on this issue. Thank you to Dr. Jamie Huysman and Carol Zernial. I'm Ron Aaron. Thanks for joining us today on Take 10.